Ooby-doo! It's everyone's favorite boomer and vintage lens enthusiast. And I thought we would talk about the Z-mount cameras. This is the Z50 here. It's got a adapter on it, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Z-mount. Nikon reinvented the mirrorless camera. I think it's the best mirrorless camera around. Of course, it's pricey. But what's the benefit of mirrorless cameras? Is when an adapter, you can put any lens on it. There's tons and tons of old manual lenses from the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, and the 50s. Now let's just stay in the Nikon environment for a minute. Nikon has their F-mount lenses. They started out as manual lenses. Everything was manual, focus, adjusting the aperture. So let's look at that. This is actually a Pentax to Nikon Z. And what it is, say if it was a F lens, it would be the same thing. It wouldn't matter. Well, I'm just using this as an example. It's just an empty tube. I like the ones that have a tripod socket. I always look for those. And I'm willing to spend the extra $2 or $3 to get a tripod socket. So it has the Pentax mount on one side where you put your lens, and it has the Z mount that attaches to the camera. But it's just an empty tube, and that's all it does. So even if you had an automatic lens, it would still be manual. Everything would be manual. Focus, aperture, stop, everything. Okay? Now, here is Nikon's own FTZ adapter. So you have the Z mount here that goes on the camera, and any F lens goes on here. I happen to have an F lens. Let's look at it. Oops. Okay, line the dots with the dots. Oh my God. I think it goes like this or something. How does it work? All right. Right? So, this lens is an old EIS, which means that aperture indexing. That's all that means. So it's still completely manual, without a doubt. Well, you have to adjust the aperture yourself. You have to adjust the focus yourself. All right. So let's just take this off for a minute. That's always the reverse of everybody else. Okay, there we go. Put that on and protect that. If you look in here, you'll see that there's some gold-plated electrical contacts there. And if you look on this side, there's some gold-plated electrical contacts there. This is the side that mounts in the camera, and these would line up with the electrical contacts in the camera. And then if you have a more modern lens that has full aperture control, electronic aperture control, the contacts on the lens would hit here. And then if you were to put the lens in the, I think on Nikon, you just go past the last, the smallest aperture, and you go into automatic mode. And then the camera could take over. You could go into A mode or S mode, and then the camera would set everything else. Except there's one caveat. There's all sorts of Nikon automatic focus lenses, and this thing doesn't work with the automatic focus. How about that? So this costs $189. This empty tube with this two mounting flanges, they're like $20. This was like $200. It's a nicely made. It's got a tripod socket. That's always a plus. Of course, it has to be made to their specs so everything's accurate. But, no autofocus. If you have a ton of Nikon lenses and you got the older ones, then it doesn't matter. You're any mirrorless camera you would get adapter for, you're just going to have this really fine manual lens. Okay, so let's look at the Fringer EF-Z. EF, that's Canon EOS electronic focus, right? Oh, it's got a tripod socket. It seems really well made. This is the mounts onto the camera, this side, and it's got these electronic contacts. Oh yeah, just like the Nikon one, right? Electronic contacts. It's a Z mount, and it has electronic contacts. All right. On this side, though, they have some. If you notice, this is where the F-mount lenses, the contacts are on the top, and here they're on the bottom in the Canon world. So these are the contacts where your Canon EOS lens would pop on here. EOS lenses, I believe they are all autofocus. They're all have the apertures controlled by the camera. So from side, besides from being a tube, right, it must have some sort of a computronium in there that's converting the signals. So going in, the Nikon camera understands what lens and all that cool stuff. And then it sends a signal back out that the lens understands is how to focus and set the aperture. This thing is like $350, and it's well worth it. This is the best investment you can make if you're going to buy a Nikon Z camera. I am a Canon guy. I came up as a Canon guy for 20 or 30 years. No, 25 years. I've been a Canon guy. I invested in a lot of Canon bodies. I walked up as they went, their models went up. I had the original Canon Digital Rebel, the XT, the XTI, the T1i, the T3i, the SL2. And of course, I bought a lot of Canon glass because I was totally into it. So now I came by a Z6. Some guy sold me a Z6. He didn't like it. And it was $150 off, and it was a kit. It came with the FTZ adapter. It came with the 20 to 70 millimeter f4, and I got a battery and a charger, and it came in a box and everything. So I got it for $150 less, and I saved sales tax. So it was a good deal at the time. So what I went out and I bought a couple F lenses, just a couple, like 2 or 3. And yeah, 3. I bought this 50 millimeter this is the 20 millimeter f3.5. This is a pro lens. It's beautiful. This is a fantastic lens. I have the 50 millimeter f1.8, and I have the 200 millimeter f4 micro Nikkor with the ED glass and all that good stuff. The really good one. And that's the extent of the F lenses I got. So I have adapters. I'm going to just bring out this Sony for a minute. Sure, this Sony's cheap. I bought it for around $25. The adapters are $20. You can throw any lens on it, you know. So I bought a bunch of adapters and a bunch of lenses. So I said, well, you know, I got all these lenses. And let's go out and spend $20 more so I could use them on a Z system. And it works out great. So, you know, here I have, this is a 55 millimeter f1.2 Canon lens, and it just has a dumb adapter on it. Well, I don't want to say dumb. It's just, you know, the bare bones technology you need to adapt a lens onto this. So it's totally manual, right? Totally focus manual. And of course, you have to either go into manual mode with this. But as mirrorless lenses go, Canon nailed it. Now you gotta understand, Sony, they were the first to really mass produce these and get them out there and get everyone all excited about them. And the very first adapters, you can only get them for the Sony. And only later, as other companies put out their cameras, you get adapters. Now, I'm a Canon guy, and I looked at the first Canon mirrorless camera. I think it was called the M1. And it was pretty sucky. Super slow autofocus. And, you know, what's the sense of that? Super slow autofocus. The M2 and all the other M's are much faster autofocus, but I never went for it. And I got into the Sony environment for mirrorless camera and vintage lenses. And then only lately, in the past couple of years, did I go to the Nikon Z system. And all I could say is the Z system, compared to everyone else, is the way to go. If you're serious about that. Like I'm going to only point out once more, the only fault with the Z system is the articulating screen. Here's a cheap Sony camera you can pick up for, you know, less than $200, and the articulating screen flips up, and you can put it on a tripod, and you can do your selfies or blogging and vlogging all you want. So it's got that going for it. But if you look at this camera, which even used is going to cost twice or three times as much as that Sony. Let's look at their articulating screen. The tripod socket's there, so if you put it on a tripod, it's going to be blocking your screen. If you're out in the field, sure, you could do a selfie of yourself, but it's weird that it's under the camera instead on top of the camera. So this is not a blogging or vlogging camera. That's a big no-no for that. And the Z6, and I guess in the Z9, are in the same boat as far as I know. Now, Canon solved this by having a fully articulating screen that instead of having this hinge mechanism like this, it has like a hinge here. So it folds that way, and then you can flip it the whole 180 degrees. But the build quality of this is fantastic. It takes fantastic pictures. It has a menu with a lot of adjustments in it, fine-tune things. You can customize all the buttons all you want. In fact, it's a little too complicated for me, you know. So, but it's a camera you could grow into. Like you just use it. You have your favorite settings, the things you could do, and then you have for some time you say, "Wow, I didn't know it could do this," and then you start using that feature. So that's what's so great about it. But like I said, $20, $200, $350. So there you go. This came with the camera. I went and I bought this. I was very apprehensive about buying it, but the Fringer is fantastic. You know, now I could use all my Canon glass on this thing, and all I could say is Canon, their glass, their high-end stuff, is just as good as anything Nikon puts out. They're equal in that respect. Of course, they both have like more consumer-oriented items that are just mediocre at best, but you know, they're way cheaper. So that's the thing. So that's it in a nutshell. But let's take this off and show you how easy it is. See that this flips off. And then your Canon lens goes here. And then you're good to go. But let's put the F mount on. Same thing. And then you put your lens on. And that's it. You're good to go. If Nikon had made these so the newer lenses, the autofocus worked on those F-mount, oh, they would hit a killer combination. I can't figure out why they did this. They wanted you to buy Z-mount lenses? I don't know. Of course, there's tons and tons of these beautiful, fantastic old F-mount lenses, and you just for the inconvenience that you have to turn a dial or figure out what you're doing here, you know, all right. Oh, but you lose a picture, you know, but maybe the pictures you'll get will be really, really good. So, and well, this thing is unbelievable. And this is it. You say you buy this for $350, you could pick up all sorts of used Canon glass for that. You know, they're out there. They use Canon glass, so you could get them for a bargain. I mean, you spend $350 for this, you could get some use L lenses at 50% off, and you'll save a lot of money. A lot of money. And it works beautiful. This Fringer device works flawlessly. With any Canon lens I put on this, it worked flawlessly. And even the second markets. I used the Tokina super wide with this, and it actually works better than on the Canon cameras I got. So it's got that going for it. All right, so this is the 70-300 millimeter Canon L lens, and I put it on the Nikon Z50 using the Fringer adapter, and luckily the Canon has built-in IS. Of course, if you put it on the Z6, you have to turn off the IS in the lens and just let the body do its thing. So if you have both cameras, you got to be aware of that when you're switching back and forth. And the Canon is really good for these close-ups. Now, you got to remember, this is a 20 megapixel sensor, so you could crop a lot, and Look at the detail. I mean, all right, I made some adjustments in the into the camera. When you go into each picture style mode, whether it's neutral, monochrome, vibrant, you can adjust all the parameters. This is a full frame crop. I dialed in to the crop 1920x1080, and I didn't do any resizing. This is a full frame crop, these Bs, using the Canon 70 to 300 millimeter L lens. It was at 300 millimeters, and the detail and the dynamic range is fantastic of both the lens and this camera. And if you notice, I'm an ISO 1000 too. So at any rate, I went into the these parameters, and you could adjust a sharpness, but then there's also this thing called clarity. There's a thing called mid sharpness, and of course you could do the contrast and the brightness and the saturation also. And so you could fine tune it exactly the way you want. And there's like 50 steps in some of these. Not only does it has a major step where you turn one dial, but then if you turn another dial, it does like 5 steps in between those steps. So that's pretty fantastic. Now we're using the Tokina. Use the Tokina, the Z50, the Fringer adapter. Oh, that's just a fantastic lens. It performed better in bright daylight than it did, I think, in the overcast. Of course, I stopped down more, which is has something to say for it, instead of f4. But I used a whole variation of f-stops just to see what it would do. Of course, here's the famous, renowned Tokina flare. The sun was just out of the field of view there, and it's like bouncing all around, and it's making these rainbow stripes. Now there used to be in this spot there used to be a barber shop, because the barber shop's gone, and I was just thinking, what are we going to put in there? More tall, giant buildings. So Morristown is a changing, evolving city, and it seems to be getting more massive. Oh, well, here's a quaint building, the Grand Cafe. I would never go in there because it's too expensive for me. I mean, if someone said, "Oh, Mike, come on with us, we're having a party at Grand Cafe, don't worry about it, I'm picking up a tab," of course I would go. Now here's a much more modern building. The cornerstone says 1999. It's a big giant parking garage, and there's a reflection in the window of the condos in back. And here's some more condos. All these condos are like maybe 20 or 30 years old, and for Morristown that's new. And there's even more newer stuff going up. So there's a whole range of ages from 100 plus up to the ultra modern. I like this juxtaposition of this picture because they had the white flowering tree and the reflections of these other trees in the background, and it's also a big giant office cube. But they still have these quaint old buildings. They have to be 100 years old. You know, say if it's 2020, you're talking about the 1920s, and you see they pruned these trees back, and all you see is restaurants, artsy-fartsy shops, ethnic groceries, phone stores, send money to foreign countries because there's a lot of immigrants there. This is Speedwell Ave, and it was a very Spanish neighborhood. I like this building with the American flags, and all the buildings were a slightly different color. One's gray, one's white, one's green, one's sort of a gold color. Here's one that was pink, painted pink at one time. And you can see the old building in the background where they filled up the windows. And eventually these buildings are all going to be gone, and it's all going to be urban renewal, I would imagine. I think this used to be a fire department. Those look like fire department doors, I would imagine, but it turned into some other office. Oh, how many towns have shoe repair? Here's an interesting church with this stainless steel steeple thing. Wire-frame stainless steel steeple. Speedwell Ave. This is like some sort of like a mall. The ground floor is a mall. I guess they have offices upstairs. I've never been in it. Notice how the lines are pretty straight there. Not too much distortion, huh? Now, if you go down some of these side streets, and then they have like old rentals, but you can see the big office buildings in the background. And this telephone pole, that's not from wide angle distortion. It was really leaning that much. Oh, there's old-time brick buildings all over. And here we have like the low early morning sun is casting shadows on it. Just thought it was cool looking. A church steeple from a side street, and you can see the downtown center and one of the many parking garages that are all over. Parking garages. They're like these horizontal stripes, with the levels are dark on the inside where the sun can't get in, and you got the bright light, bright concrete outside, and the trees are always casting interesting shadows on them. Now, I wasn't perfectly parallel with this building, and of course there's going to be some perspective distortion, but the lines are really, really straight, which surprises me a lot. Not too much pin cushion or barrel distortion to be seen here. This building on the left is a brand new building. It's just been completed like a couple months ago and is ready for rent. I wish I had seen what was there before this building was there, so I could have captured that change. So there's one downtown area where they got these big buildings and parking garages, and it's just interesting to watch it change, because Morristown proper is probably going to turn into a metropolis, Cyclopsilix. This building, I think, is going to get trashed, and something new is going to go up here. But I figured I'd document it before it's gone. I mean, one day I'll just go to Morristown and it'll be knocked down. So these trees, all these trees were flowering at the same time, and in front of these quaint old buildings. Now you see this building on the right. It looks like it's all spiffy and modernized, but it was just renovated with a facade. Now here's, they're finishing up here. You see some piles of dirt in back of the fence, and eventually this whole intersection is going to be upgraded, look nice and new. And that's like a probably 150-year-old building, that red one on the left. And besides from the white trees, there's an occasional pink or reddish colored blossoms. This is in the parking lot. So, oh, what a nice tree. So I walked up and I took its picture. There wasn't too much graffiti in downtown Patterson, but there was some here. This is in the parking lot that is adjacent to the post office. That's the post office building in the background. It looks like someone didn't get to finish that. Maybe the cops came along and popped them. There's an obelisk in the middle there, and that's a representation of a Union soldier from the Civil War. And this is the green in the town center. And all those buildings in the background are all empty. They're vacant. Here's a statue, and of course I was sort of shooting pretty close into the sun, and it was pretty hard to take a picture of it. I think I got it. But if you'll notice on the next picture, the phase angle is different, and then it's much more dramatic looking, dramatic horse's ass. And this is some patriot from the Revolutionary War. He's leaving his family, and it's on top of a fountain, and when the weather gets warm, they turn the fountain on. This is the green. Those stores are all empty, but I like this tree. So I was just wondering, what's going to happen to those stores? They're all going to get knocked down. A lot of them say for rent, but they haven't been rented in a long time. This is Bella Oxmix and his dog Peaches, but of course this really isn't Bella Oxmix. This is the Seeing Eye people, or headquarters in Morristown. So I put the statue up. This flowering trees, the green, and the American flag in the background, and this blue sky. I always like to say, today is brought to you by the color blue. This thing has a great, handles the contrast great from, the darks to the lights, and except for, you got a bright light at one particular spot where it flares out. Otherwise, it does a really, really good job. Like this building. How long is this building going to be here? Is it going to get knocked down and some office cube going up eventually? These, you can see, these are all old buildings, and they just put a facade in the front, and they upgraded them. Although the buildings down the street towards the left, they're much more modern buildings. But I just like the way the shadow, sort of cut the building. This is one of the numerous parking garages. I was in a pedestrian walkway, and I just like the lighting there and everything. The gray bricks, the red bricks, some eatery across the street, a car going by. And then there's alleyways. They have all these alleyways. And if you look down, it all depends the time of day you get there. You get these interesting dramatic shadows, and then you get maybe sunlight reflecting off of buildings, and it looks industrial but doesn't look industrial. The laundromat is some dance club, and they still had their lights on, and there's sun reflecting off the building and back of me making these lighter areas, and that's why I took the picture. But notice how the lines are straight. Now here's another high contrast situation. The sun isn't back of this tree. And in the Z50 handled this exposure excellently. So you can see the shadows in the street, you can see the bark on this tree. And here's another interesting picture. You can see a little bit of flare in the upper left-hand corner, but and there's some down in the right-hand corner, lower right, but it's like white wall, the church steeple, a big window with reflection. These eateries come and go. Maybe they're only there for a year. They open up, they have a grand opening, and then a year later they say we're closing down and we move to some other county. So I just took a picture through their window. And here we have another brick wall with a window and a reflection of another brick wall, and this faux colonial portico or something. The Dublin pub. I mean, it's just a strange thing sticking out where everything is all red brick, and here's this green building there. I wonder if pubs look like that in Dublin, Ireland. It's just this big green and black, some gold trim, and they have a camera there so they could video the drunkards coming in and out, I guess. But they have interesting entrance. They got some pillars and the coach lanterns and the top piece, and there's some pretty harsh reflections there, but I left it, and I don't see any flare from it. This is an interesting picture. This is South Street, one of the main streets. I was there early enough that there wasn't any traffic, but I just like the shadows on the sidewalk, and to show the whole area. How is this going to change the skyline? The church will stay there, but the skyline's going to change. Here's another church, and I'm sure the church will be there for a long, long time, but how is the background going to change? Are there any big office buildings going to go up eventually in the background? This is the Performing Arts Center, and the trees always cast interesting shadows on this wall. Right? Were these arch things, were they once windows or something? I don't know. Here's another one of those massive fortress churches, and here's one of the old-fashioned brick cubes. But at one time, this brick cube was ultra-modern. People say, wow, look at that. A 3-4-story building. Wow. And here's another one of these weird alleyways. Both these buildings, I think they were painted like tan or something. And just the way the sunlight was reflecting off the one building and lighting up the alleyway, I found interesting. And here's another street. How is the skyline going to change over the years? I mean, it's not going to stay the same. There's some newer ones, but then there's some older buildings that look like some of them renovated. But another high contrast situation that was handled beautifully by the Dokina and the Nikon. I mean, the sun was right back at his tree. And look at the dynamic range is amazing. I love reflections in windows. This is a professional building, some medical group, and across the street they were all commercial buildings. At one time they must have been residences, but they've been upgraded to commercial properties. And of course the trees were putting on a fine show, and I really liked that. That was cool. I like this wall with the shadow of the lighting fixture. And of course, these branches will turn green eventually, and then in the fall they turn red. So I guess I should go back and get a picture when they're all green, and in the fall when they're red on red. And there's all these dramatic shadows and very industrial looking in all these alleyways, especially when the sun is doing some specular reflections off them and everything. And it brings up the relief in all the brick surfaces. I think this is Elm and South Street